right, we are thrilled to be closing out our morning session here with a really great conversation. I'm going to be turning things over to the moderator of this discussion, Agenia Walker-Clark. She's the president of Fisk University. She's going to be joined right here on stage by Deborah Roberts. She's the ABC News Senior National Affairs Correspondent. You've seen her on Nightline, Good Morning America, and World News Tonight. She's the co-host of 2020. She's won multiple Emmy Awards, a Peabody Award for the 2020 special Say Her Name about Breonna Taylor. Her latest New York Times best-selling book, Lessons Learned and Cherished, is all about celebrating impactful teachers. And she had a book signing on Monday, so hopefully some of you had a chance to stop by. But we're really excited to have them here. They're also really great friends. They've come up in their careers together, so we know this is going to be a really exciting conversation. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Agenia and Deborah.
Well, that was awfully tepid. Come on, come on. Good morning.
Good morning. What a great way to start our day.
I guess so.
I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to do this before, Deborah.
Never.
And the two of us have known each other
years.
But all of that to say, I think one of the most exciting days I've had in my friendship with Deborah was the day that she called and she said, I'm doing a book. I'm like, you've been talking about doing a book, but what is this book going to be about? And you said, teachers. And just the way you said it, I remember thinking, this will be a New York Times bestseller, because all of us have a story about the teachers we love. But how and why did you come to the decision to do this book?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say it is so exciting that I'm not doing this for a change, that somebody else is doing the interview, so I can kick back and relax a little bit. So what a thrill to be able to sit here and do this with you, Agenia. So I had thought about maybe writing about my journey as a journalist, as a woman from small town Georgia, a black woman growing up in the South. I had sort of thought about writing about that at some point. And when I was kicking around ideas with my agent and the book agent with our agency, somehow, they just weren't that impressed with all the stuff that I had to say about my life growing up. But when I mentioned Mrs. Dorothy Hardy and my sixth grade English teacher, and I started talking about her and her impact on me, they just really lit up and they said, okay, this I think could be really worth telling. Because who doesn't have a story about a teacher, whether it's for good or for bad or for fear or for excitement, everybody's got a story somewhere about a teacher. And I started thinking about whenever I would give speeches and I would talk about my journey in life and I would talk about Mrs. Hardy, the audience would always light up. And people would come up to me afterwards and talk about their teachers with such enthusiasm and such nostalgia in their eyes. And I thought, wait a second, maybe if I just start poaching a bunch of my friends and talking about their teachers and just telling a bunch of stories, it could be what teachers need right now. And as a journalist, I was acutely aware of the fact that we were coming out of the pandemic and kids had lost all kinds of steam in the classroom, teachers had lost all kinds of steam. And I thought maybe this is a moment to honor teachers and to talk about the crisis we're facing, but also lift teachers up. And so it just sort of took off from there. And everybody I asked said, yes, I would love to talk about a teacher.
So the book comes out May 2023, and I get my copy. And inside my copy was this note. Dear friend, I'm so very proud to finally release this love letter to teachers for all they do and have done to spark excitement and inspire dreams. I thought, how beautifully stated. And then you start delving into the book, and from one story to the next, you just feel this warm feeling in your heart. But what's interesting, Deborah, is that recently Pew Research released this amazing study on teachers in public schools, grades K through 12. It just came out a few weeks ago, if you haven't had a chance to look at it. It's 6 chapters of research. But the beauty of the research to me was that it said that more than 50% of the teachers still feel fulfilled by their work. When you started talking to the different people in this book, did you have a hard time to get them to talk about the teachers that
not at all.
Made a difference?
And I love that you're looking at the glass half full instead of half empty, because the fact of it is we are in a real crisis, and the majority of teachers, while they do have some fulfillment, are expressing great dissatisfaction with the profession that they've chosen. They feel disregarded, disrespected, all of those things. So we are really in a crisis right now in this country. I'm sure many of you know this. But what I loved about talking to people, and I've had a chance to know a lot of these people over the years in passing, but I reached out to Oprah, and Oprah said, all that I am and all that I will be is because of teachers. And in that Oprah way. And she said, I can't wait to talk to you about this. Anybody I just met, I ran into in Good Morning America, behind the scenes, I would run into, somebody, Christy Turlington, the model, and I said, I'm doing this book, I would love to talk about a teacher. What people love talking about, I think, well, first of all, particularly when it came to celebrities, not talking about themselves or revealing anything that they were worried about being put on the spot, they love talking about a teacher. And in some cases, Melody Hobson, the financial wizard and genius, talked about a teacher who was very tough on her. And she said, this may come off wrong to a lot of people, but this teacher, and she told this story about a teacher who really, really gave her a hard time and kind of almost embarrassed her in class because she missed a spelling word. But she said, it taught me grit. And so everybody was excited to share something that happened for them. In fact, some people said, a teacher saved my life. Saved my life. And I thought that was it sounded kind of hyperbolic, but they said, no, believe it or not, I was in this failing situation, or I never thought I could amount to this or that. And when I had a teacher who believed in me and saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, or went that extra mile to help me, it saved me. And that is so intriguing, because I was talking when I was signing books yesterday, one of the folks here said to me, as much as you all are talking about technology, AI, and all of that, the human element is still so important when you think about the connection and the opportunity to connect with students. So no, everybody just seemed to love talking about their teachers. In fact, some people I couldn't shut up. I promised everybody they would be on the phone with me or Zoom with me, 25, 30 minutes. That's how I got them in the tent, because some people are just very, very busy. Spike Lee, Octavia Spencer, Brooke Shields, and everybody said, yeah. And they liked the idea that they didn't have to make an appointment to go and find me someplace. But some people just kept talking and talking and talking and talking, and I couldn't shut them up because they loved talking about that point in their lives.
And I will say that the fun I had reading the book was not only, reading about teachers and the impact that they had on the individuals' lives, but it was really interesting to get a little taste of their personal life and how these teachers sort of gave them that moment to pivot. But one story that I thought was fascinating was the story of Michael Strahan, one of your co-anchors.
Football Hall of Famer.
Yes, but what was fascinating was that he was one of 2 kids to graduate from his high school in Germany at the same time. But how that one teacher made him learn that he was teachable, coachable, and I think that was one of the stories that I thought, this is the art of being a teacher.
Yeah.
But that story, while it was Michael's, was kind of a thread throughout the book. Did you find that after doing several of the interviews, there seemed to have been a thread from the many, in all different walks of life?
Right.
But it seemed like there was a thread of a story there.
Well, your story, talking about growing up in Mobile, Alabama, and the teacher who saw something, you were chatty Cathy in the classroom, and, and I was probably guilty of that myself. And, the teacher sort of pulled you aside and actually pulled you up front and said, I'm going to sit you here, just to sort of get you away from the crowd. But you talked about how the teacher saw something in you that maybe you weren't even aware of. And I had a number of people say that, whether it was, a teacher in a very bright, happy, cheery kind of environment that made them feel good or seen. And a lot of people said they felt seen. Even people, Jenna Bush Hager talked about, growing up, her father wasn't president at the time, but growing up in this family, this political family, her mother was this librarian. Clearly her family was all about, reaching and education and all of that. She wasn't as good of a student as her twin sister was. And she knew it. So she was a little bit of the class clown, she said. But she had a teacher who pulled her aside and sort of encouraged her about reading and said to her, you really have the potential to. And she said that was the first time somebody said to me, you have the potential to. Now, she grew up in a family of people who were achieving, but she personally didn't feel empowered herself. And she had a teacher who actually saw something in her. And I had a number of people say that somebody saw something in them that they just had not seen, whether they came from a home that was challenged or a home that was very loving. There is something about an outsider, a stranger, and also a person of authority. And that's one of the things I think that is so sad today, because teachers don't feel they have that position of authority that teachers did when so many of us were growing up. But they really did have this position of authority. And for a child to feel that that person sees something. I mean, in my case, Mrs. Hardy said to me, and I talk about it in the book, in that syrupy Southern way, Deborah, you're a smart girl. You've got a lot going on. You're going to do well in life. And something just happened for me when she said that. And I know you have a similar story. And I had a number of people who told stories like that one teacher, or maybe multiple teachers, saw something in them and led them to believe that they were capable in ways that nobody else had before.
And you touch on something really interesting there, because in the Pew Research study that was just released a few weeks ago, it's fascinating that teachers say that there are all these distractions that they're encountering in the classroom. 33%, I believe, said something to the tune of the cell phones in the classroom are a huge distraction.
Especially in high school.
Especially in high schools. But when you read the stories in this book, I think of Christy Turlington's story, Mrs. D. She talked about how she had such poise and control, and just watching her, she saw an empowered woman standing before her in the classroom.
An empowered Black woman, too, because she had never encountered that before.
Exactly.
She had moved from California to Florida.
But when 33% of teachers are saying that, cell phones are a distraction in the classroom, I did notice that throughout the book, many of those who shared their stories did give indications of how teachers had their empowerment in the classroom. A couple made a reference of it was the way they looked at you. A couple said that when they would walk by their desk, they knew. Do you find that the experiences of the individuals that you interviewed for this book truly had those unique experiences that teachers everywhere, every day are having, but it empowered them to be responsive to those experiences?
Wow, Agenia, you are good at this. Whoa, all right, come on now, asking all these tough questions. Well, I think that one of the things that I learned from people, and I think that so many of you in your capacities, and whether you're in education or you're in a field that is related to it, or whatever field you're in, I think we all know that there are people in our midst sometimes who carry something about them, right? Some kind of an aura, or whether you are a woman looking toward maybe another woman who might be impressive and empowering, or just anybody who might be looking toward somebody who may give you an inspiration. I think that, and particularly at this time of 15, 20, maybe even more years ago, teachers, and that's one of the things I think that we all need to, think about and try to address. We celebrated teachers. I mean, people wanted to, people sought to have that profession. They wanted to be teachers because they saw it as a profession that was worthy of respect. And that's one of the complaints teachers have today. And I think to see teachers be able to carry themselves, and also too, they weren't so burdened by the curriculum in the same way teachers are today. So they could sway and come in the classroom and sort of bring something to that classroom, whether it was a man or a woman, and how they approached education. It wasn't just about the academics. It was also about who they were as people. And kids take that in. they really do take that in. And in this case, she said that her teacher she just had this sort of sense of empowerment. And that particular teacher now today, I think, leads some women's organization down in Florida where she's like a big force and a big influence. And Christy said she'd never seen anybody like that before. So the idea that this woman who was so accomplished and so unapologetic in the way she carried herself taught her something too. And of course, Christy went on to become this model and now this philanthropist and this woman who's an activist in the world. So seeing somebody in a position too that just seemed to really inspire her stayed with her.
So you shared several stories about your teachers in the book. Is it Mr. Mann?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mann, the science teacher.
Science teacher.
Yes.
Okay, so he had a sense of empowerment in his style as far as relating to the students in the classroom.
Yeah. When he would talk to us about the bones in the body, and I remember he would talk about, like, metatarpal, phalanges, this, that, whatever. He had a little sing-songy approach about talking about the bones. And I would come home and do this sing-songy thing with the bones, and my sisters thought I was so nutty. Like, what is going on? But I got so excited by his class. And he had a way of making the kids excited about learning about the skeletal system. And I just remember just being so, and I wanted to please him. I wanted to do well in his class. And that's what a great teacher can do, or educator, can just really empower kids to aspire. And that's what he did.
I got so amused with his particular story because the way you described him, he didn't sound like the kind of fellow that will be running around singing songs to his students.
Very straight
But he did.
Yeah.
But I think that what we're seeing now is that sort of the art and beauty of being an educator. You are the leader at the front of the classroom with students who are sitting there just sort of taking it all in. So this Pew Research says that as of April of 2024, that while things are complicated and complex for teachers, the majority of them say they still would recommend this as a future career for their students. I think when we read stories like these, there's no reason why all of us would want to be a teacher in a classroom.
I would like to think that's true, but unfortunately it's not. I mean, last year we had 60,000 teachers just left their positions in the States. Schools are struggling to recruit and bring in qualified teachers. A lot of teachers are starting to feel the morale is like at a 50-year low. I mean, the fact of it is the report card is pretty bad right now when it comes to teachers and education. And many of them are not feeling valued. And within 5 years, so many of them leave their positions. So I think you're right. There's no reason why we shouldn't. But we're facing a real crisis right now where people do not see this as a profession that is worthy of goals for kids to want to aspire to. Because students are dealing with this, teachers are dealing with, as you said, distractions, mental health crises in the classroom. They're dealing with feeling unsafe in the classroom. School shootings, of course, we've heard about. So there are a lot of reasons why teachers are finding it very difficult to stay in the classroom right now. And I thought that if nothing else, it's very, very true. And it's unfortunate too, because I feel like we've been here before. And I remember in the 70s and 80s, I was a child, of course, but I remember when there was this big study, government study, about the classroom and the crisis and teachers and so forth. And a lot of it was about pay and disrespect and so forth in a very different way. And there was a big, big effort on the part of the government and also states to address this. And for the most part, they did, and salaries went up, and there was a lot of attention paid to teachers and education and what was happening for them, and we sort of reversed course. We need that again, because right now, people are leaving this profession in droves. Schools this next year, as we're about to see the end of the school year this year, schools are going to struggle to try to recruit qualified teachers. It's really, really a bad situation. And my hope is that this book, while it is a walk down memory lane and there's a lot of nostalgia in there, and of course it doesn't address all the issues we're dealing with right now, but I hope it's a reminder to us that we need to prioritize not only education for our kids who so desperately need right now to be caught up and they're behind because of the pandemic and so forth, but also to value teachers and to remind them that they matter, to remind them that we think that they have the smarts and the authority to be able to do what they need to do in the classroom, that maybe some of the polarization that is in our country, that we need to address that and to give teachers really the autonomy and the opportunity to soar in ways that they used to be able to soar for us in those times and that I celebrate in the book. So that's what I'm hoping, if nothing else, conversations will get started so that we can create an environment so people see this as a noble profession again.
And I'm so hoping we get there. I mean, honestly, and we have to. We have to get there, because when you go through and you read these stories and you sort of feel the impact of what teachers have done for the many chapters in this book, one of the stories that also stood out to me was the story of Laisha Ward. Laisha is an executive at Target, and she talked about her teacher, Miss Booker. And Miss Booker was one who realized that while Laisha was chatty, she had a speech impediment. But the teacher also said, you need a speech therapist. Just that one moment of intervention changed the direction of her life. I just feel that this book talks about how teachers have been that one moment of intervention that allowed all of us to arrive to the place that we are today. Are there more stories like this that you haven't written about yet?
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm sure. I had to stop at a certain point because I had to make my deadline, but I wanted to just keep going. And I have to tell you, as a journalist, I love delving into stories, whether it's true crime stories for 2020, which is what I do regularly, or whether they're stories that are just interesting stories. I loved hearing these stories from just various people. I mean, Lucy Liu, the actress, I just DM'd Lucy. I just like sort of looked, online. I was just looking at all kinds of folks. I DM'd Lucy and said, would you do this? And she said, oh, I'd love to. And Lucy talked about being an immigrant in New York and having parents, Chinese parents who didn't really speak the English well, and how she was falling behind because she, in some ways, had a deficiency there too, and how this one teacher could see that she was struggling and gave her a little extra attention after school, much like Laisha's teacher did too, and in her words too, sort of saved her in a way. So I just thought that there were so many different stories, and I so loved mining people and just reaching out to people and hearing these stories. And there were days where I just, would feel so excited in the midst of everything going on in our country and very difficult times coming out of the pandemic, that I just heard these great stories of hope and inspiration. So yeah, there were so many other stories that I could have told, wanted to tell, but I felt like at a certain point I had to stop. But I felt these stories were just such a great cross-section from celebrities, people who weren't necessarily well known, fashion designers, people from all walks of life, you, who's now president of a university, just so many different stories that just highlighted what it meant to them to have somebody in those very early years, or sometimes even in later years. Bobby Brown, the makeup artist, talked about after, high school, somebody who believed in them and saw something in them and actually gave them the courage and the inspiration to move forward.
Well, this book was a fun read for me. It was enjoyable, it was special.
And it's sold in the bookstore down here too, by the way, so there's time to get a copy. I signed a few copies yesterday.
And it's a fun read to enjoy. There was one person you interviewed that I'd be curious to know about. How did this particular interview go? And how did the story unfold in your book? And that was an interview you did with a gentleman by the name of Al Roker.
I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going to do that.
So tell me about talking to Al Roker about his teacher.
So my husband heard me talking to all of these folks about teachers, and of course I knew over the years that he had this one teacher, Mrs. Fryer, he had talked about. So I mostly interviewed everybody for the book, but because I was up against a hard deadline, I had a co-writer who worked with me, a ghostwriter on this, and I gave a few people for her to phone up and do their interviews, including Al, because she had worked with Al before. Well, Al was quite insulted that I sent his story off to be told to the co-writer of the book. I'm not worthy of having you interview me for the book. He was quite annoyed by it. And he said, I don't think I gave my best interview with her anyway. So how come everybody else gets to be interviewed by the author of the book and I don't? So I wound up interviewing him again for the book to make sure his story was told in the way that he wanted. I was shocked he pitched such a fit about it. But anyway, it was really interesting to hear him tell his story about his teacher and include him in the book as well.
Include him as well. The stories that you bring together in this book are stories that we can live with forever. But if you had to say that as you were going through this experience of writing this book, the one thing you walked away with that created the greatest sense of joy and pride for you, what would it be?
Wow, you hit me with a hard one on the way out. I would say really more than anything else, just that words matter. And I've said this before when I've spoken to people. There are so many people, whether they're young people in the way of kids or adults, who are waiting for somebody to sort of just make them feel that they matter. And I always say, be mindful of what you say and how you behave toward people, whether it's good or for bad, because they may just take you at your word about what you think about them. So be mindful, words and actions matter, and they have an influence far beyond what you might imagine.
Oh, I knew. Lessons Learned and Cherished. The author is Deborah Roberts. Can I just tell you, it's the greatest gift to share with the teachers in your life, to share with those of us who are teachers, whether we are formally or not, but more importantly, to really honor those who have really made all of our lives unique and special. Deborah, thank you for doing this book.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
And there's time to pick up copies between now and the end of the school year, so I hope you will, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you all.